Well, good day. On behalf of Global Science Technology Forum, I'd like to welcome all of you, international scholars, to JMCOM 2015. My name is Dr. Dan Eller. I'm a professor at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California, USA. And I'm a researcher and a professor. I teach public relations in the journalism department at the university. And part of my duties are active research. My research agenda is in the area of communications and public relations in the public sector. I came out of industry after completing my doctorate into a teaching position at the university. And my industry position was working for the state of California in communications and public relations. And that experience and interest is what takes me today into my research looking at public sector communications and public relations. The topic of my discussion today is looking at moving beyond a traditional public affairs model and into a public relations model. Typically, public agencies work more towards dissemination of information to their publics, and in terms of that, it's a public affairs model. But the public relations model is more collaborative. Sure, public agencies can be honest, accurate, hopefully, and transparent, but maybe not as engaging as they can be using a public relations model. This would incorporate feedback from their constituencies, stakeholders, publics, people that have a stake in voters in the public agencies, residents within a county, city, state, national government. And using focusing on a collaborative model, public relations model, it can be more long-term in nature in establishing those working relationships. And once again, in public relations, we are in the business of relationship management. So that's what my talk will look at today, and how we can use social media as a tool to incorporate this feedback loop, both internal and external to our publics, to help move from this public affairs traditional model to the public relations model and be more collaborative, and hopefully do a more active job of managing our relationships with our publics. Now, the public relations model focuses on transparency. As many of you know, my fellow scholars, that PR is all about creating relationships, managing relationships, and looking for ways to find those latent publics, people that have a value like ours, but maybe aren't aware yet of who we are and how we fit together, and they're not active yet. They haven't been actively acting upon what we do have in common. And our goal is to bring them from a latent stage into an aware stage, and then from there move them into an active stage where they can actively work with us as we would work actively with them. Once again, that incorporates a two-way symmetrical model. These are models that the researchers Hunt and Gruenick founded, and their work now over the last few decades has brought us to a point where now with social media, we have an opportunity truly to incorporate this within our agencies and within our publics, both internal and external to the agency. Now, the public relations model allows for a collaborative relationship with agencies, publics, and stakeholders, where the public affairs communication model, it utilizes public information or two-way asymmetrical communications model. And as Hunt and Gruenick pointed out in that asymmetrical format, yes, it can be two-way where we're getting information in, but are we really utilizing that information? Are we actively then engaging with our publics? And as you know, just with your own personal use on social media, you can be looking at what the others are saying, but are you engaged with them? Are you speaking back with them? Are you resolving conflicts, building trust, building a way to, I guess, do better business? And in government, we call this better government practices. And good government practices are important. We are stakeholders for our voters, our constituencies in the public trust. So we should move beyond this public affairs model that focuses on disseminating simply information to constituencies. Yes, it's important that people know what's going on. In fact, that is probably one of the most important things, is information and knowledge to the public. But we need to know what their thoughts are, and then we need to engage with them in a conversation. Government needs to open the door and allow people to not only see within, but come within, speaking and working with people. This collaboration will build stronger trust and a stronger base both for us internal and for those external to the agency. Two-way symmetrical models that focus on information, both internal and external from the agency, missing this feedback loop, it doesn't allow for a proactive public, both internal publics and external publics. Why do we want a proactive public? We want people to take responsibility, both within our organizations and our public agencies and outside. When people have a level of responsibility, we're validating them and their involvement within the agencies. And that's where we move into this public relations model, where there's a process of governing by the public sector. I mean, of course, they've elected officials in, let's say, state government, which I worked in. I worked with elected people that were appointed either, let's say, by the governor or by the people. Well, then people should have an ability to work and communicate daily with these individuals to co-govern. It makes for a stronger agency. It makes for a stronger public. It's all about collaboration. Collaboration creates a context that allows for those that we work with and for us in the agency to share a common goal, to reach our objectives, to find the tools and tactics that we need in our public relations efforts to be not only creative, and certainly government can be creative. Government can find new ways and new good government practices, and many times that comes through working directly by communicating with our publics. Although many public agencies lack a collaboration relationship with their constituencies, not only in communications, but planning efforts, implementation, evaluation of what they're doing. These decisions throughout from beginning to end can be strengthened when we're working collaboratively with our publics by sharing information both in and back out in this shared two-way symmetrical format. This lack of collaboration may produce actually conflict. And conflict sometimes can be simply a lack of people feeling included. Inclusiveness allows people to feel validated, as I said earlier, and this validation is then a form of transformational leadership, where we're acting in a strong leadership role to work with the people that we represent in a public agency. So we then become an agency using a proactive public relations model. This allows us ultimately to not only create buy-in and bring these latent to aware to active publics hopefully into a role of a stakeholder where they have an actual stake in what we're doing, but more than anything create a long-term working relationship to move beyond simply information dissemination with public affairs, but in a public relations format. This is something that within our public agencies, the public seeks, and we should be looking at ways that we can accommodate the public. Implementation, though, for this is something that's newer for many public agencies, especially with the advent of broadband technology, information dissemination. I mean, back in the day, and some of you may remember, but certainly in my day of practice, I can remember controlling communications, content, and timing, and be able to not only control communications, but images, things that people see and hear, and when they hear it, and what they're hearing. Well, today, with citizen journalists, with the general public, with the technology that almost all of us have in our pocket, in the palm of our hand, we're communicating broadly. And if we're not part of that conversation as an agency, then sometimes we're looked at as being outside of the general communication collaboration that's taking place. And that's where we in a public agency can be and move towards what's called e-government. E-government is actually where the government is now involved in this whole electronic technology, social media world that we live in daily, here, abroad, throughout the world. It's global. E-government allows public agencies not only to disseminate, but capture information. And that's what's really important here, is capturing the information. Because when we capture it, if we do something with it, where we actually then, the public see that we've captured it, that feedback loop I talked about, then people start to see that they are being heard. And you know something, when people are being heard, even if we can't take the suggestions that they have, or the conflict resolution isn't an easy fix, or maybe we can't even fix it right now, lack of money, lack of trade power with employees, the system itself, equipment, whatever the things that we're lacking. When the public sees that we're actually validating them, hearing them, and hopefully trying to find a way, a balance in some way that we can meet common ground, it strengthens what we're doing as far as our public relations efforts with our publics and constituencies. Now, public relations and communications looks at usually using this two-way symmetrical communication model. The two-way symmetrical model allows public agencies and non-public, non-profit, corporate, and individuals to validate and implement, hopefully, the information they're getting back from their publics. It's this balanced flow of communications that I talked about earlier. It helps to maintain a relationship based on mutual understanding and the needs. Now, it's not just external needs. In public agencies, we have needs. Maybe it's a small agency that needs volunteer help and a call for volunteers. Well, working collaboratively, especially through social media, to disseminate our needs to the publics, hopefully that people will step up and help us as we can help them in our efforts in a public agency. The issues here within my research, though, and what the literature is pointing out in terms of a public relations model in government, in public sectors, is sometimes what it comes up against, and that's buy-in from management. I spoke about leadership earlier, and we can manage things, but we can't manage people. We can lead people. And our public sector leaders are seeing that it's time to take on not the old school, the old way of doing business with the managerial styles, which is that top-down transactional form, but the transformational style of leadership where people are working together both internally and externally, actually taking information from employees, from publics external to the agency, and having it feed back up to the top leadership in an agency. Our, I guess, call to duty in public relations is to be that professional that can counsel management on the things to do and what are good government practices. The ways to use the Twitters and the Facebooks the Instagrams, all the forms of social media that are popular out there today and the ones that haven't been developed and will be popular in the future, and to incorporate that into our government communications model where we're working with people two-way symmetrically. We want to be able to inform and educate the public, but empower citizens. And when you have an empowered public citizen that is aware of what you're doing within a public agency and how they can work with the public agency, it builds trust. It's based on honesty. It's based on all the tenets of strong, professional, ethical public relations, which should be part of any public sector position. And the use of social media is what's allowing this now to actually open the door. The thing that's kind of cracking the egg and allowing, as a public relations tool, a communication tool that allows this balance of communication back and forth to publics. Our conference is looking at social media and technology, both in journalism, communications, and public relations. And my paper and my research builds upon previous presentations that I've done here with JMCOM back here in Singapore a year ago in 2014 and Thailand in 2015, where we were looking at ways that we can move beyond a one-way public information model or even press agentry model where we're just promoting something to a two-way asymmetrical model where we're hearing from people, but then now moving towards that two-way symmetrical model where we're actually working with people, feeding back in that feedback loop. And the way to do that with this research is through the use of social media. Communication directors, the people that are working to counsel upper leadership and management, needs to be able to take that role and take those ideas in, and so the leaders see how it can be incorporated safely into a public agency. I know what some people may be thinking, that in public agencies, it's all about getting through the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the elected period, and being successful to get through that. But this brings success. It brings success by people seeing that they're part of the system and their voices are being heard. And in public relations, that's what we're about, is that strong relationship management. So in closing, the implications for the practitioner is to move beyond the traditional public affairs model in a public agency, to move forward to a collaborative, two-way symmetrical public relations model in public agencies. It can help to build stronger relationships, those that are based on long-term collaborative relationships that are sustainable. And to do this, public agencies need to be actively involved in social media, using the social media platforms and being two-way symmetrical within the use of that platform, those platforms, not just to take in information, but to be actively speaking with their publics through the use of social media. Achieving their goals as a holistic team, a global team, a team that works together globally and holistically, is truly a proactive public relations model. I want to thank you for allowing me to present to you today on behalf of my research in public sector communications and public relations and the use of social media. Once again, I can be reached at D-E-L-L-E-R, Deller, at calpoly, calpoly.edu. I want to thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing my fellow scholars at the next opportunity, and I hope you have a wonderful remainder and trip back home from Singapore in 2015. Thank you.